Philosophy is defined as a fundamental study of knowledge, reality, and existence. That is from an academic perspective. It could also be defined as those values and principles that determine people's behavior. So someone could say, this is my philosophy. Maybe it's also what we define as values in our society. What are the values that drive our society? How come those values and those philosophies are changing? And do we like the dimension in which it is changing? That's what we're going to be looking at today. And we're also going to be looking at it from the perspective of creative writing. How does creative writing affect the philosophy, the values, fundamental values of a society? What is it that we are missing in our society that we now complain about how our values have become skewed in some directions? What about those days, what we call the good old days in the 40s, 50s, when we had a lot of good creative writing that shaped the views and perspectives of our people? The writings of people like Chinua Achebe, of course, Wole Soyinka, Cyprian Ekwensi, among a host of others. The Animan series, later on Pacesetter series, what have you. What exactly is even creative thinking? And how can we get it to begin to impact society? Again, today, joining us to discuss this is Mr. Everlasting Hope, a creative writer.
Thank you very much,
So you're welcome
Doctor.
to the program.
Thank you very much.
You heard my premise, to the introduction I did in order to have this show. What do you have to contribute to that,
Thank you very much. You spoke about Chinua Achebe. He wrote his book in 1958.
That's the first book?
That's the first book.
Okay.
In 1958. Today, the book has sold over 500 million copies.
Wow. 500
and
million.
In our curriculum, the book is still being adopted as a book of our national identity.
Yes.
It mirrors the people.
Would you say that's creative writing?
That is creative writing.
Okay. What is creative writing? Yes.
Thank you for taking the word out of my mouth. Creative writing is, I don't want to call it fiction. Creative writing is mirroring your environment, mirroring your society at large, mirroring the world from where you see it, and telling the world that this is my perspective on what I've seen. It may have prejudices.
Okay.
It may be factual. Sometimes it may be a combination of both. But we, the readers, we look at it and shape our opinions. Sometimes it could be positive. Sometimes it could be negative. So over time, writers like you have mentioned have helped shape the society. I will give you a scenario right from, and let me call it an historical perspective. From the days of Homer, the author of Odysseus and Iliad.
Yes.
I think that is about the 7th century. When he wrote that book, it was a poetry, historical poetry. It took about a century over for Alexander the Great to leave the exact character of what was written in the Odyssey.
Okay.
And what did he do specifically? He copied the good traits of some of the characters. For instance, Alexander the Great would copy a trait in a military perspective, and let me call it military strategy. He copied the good guy who will go to war with his subordinates. Unlike the bad character in Odysseus that will sit down on his throne and wait for subordinate to fight a war and either win or lose. So you can see how literature, creative writing, shaped a man like Alexander the Great who took over the world before the age of 13. I will also give you another instance, and I will come closer to the 16th century.
Okay.
A man like Shakespeare, he wrote books like Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and all that. Do you know 400 years within the time frame after which he wrote the book, people like Karl Marx in his book copied most of his influence in his books came from Shakespeare. Not only him. After some time, people like Mandela, while he was in prison on the island, he had the whole collections of Shakespeare at his coffers. Not forgetting the 16th president of the United States. I'm talking about Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
He had the backlog of all the collections of Shakespeare, and he used it to, disseminate, rule his people with fairness. That's one of the powers of creative writing.
How would you then say how would you say this has impacted in Nigeria?
Thank you very much.
Or in our part of the world?
Thank you very much, very greatly. Before I tell you how it has impacted in Nigeria, I will talk about how it impacted probably in the US. For instance, in the US, they have over 9,000 libraries. 9,000 libraries. These libraries are owned by the public agencies. So when you contrast it with Nigeria, we have just 365 libraries in Nigeria. Not excluding about 100 libraries that are privately owned. So you can see a great nation that wants to help its people, want to create change. They created libraries. If you divide 9,000 by 50 states in the United States, you are going to have about 130 public libraries.
But I'm even more concerned with how can we say that people are people still reading? That's one. But even if they were, what are we writing that people are reading to shape our society? Oh, because again, in terms of, we are talking about creative writing, fine, but also other creative endeavors, for example, like music. And you can see the kind of songs that we see. Someone says, if you don't get money, hide your face. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or something of that sort. If you don't have money, get out of here. We're not interested.
Yes.
We only want people who have money. And you see that, and that is easier to absorb because you are not having to sit down and pour through pages of all sorts of things. You're just watching on TV, and of course we praise our Hollywood and our music industry, but that seems to be the creative part that people are absorbing. And if you say on the average, maybe 80% of the time, the kind of information they are passing across, which is shaping our society today, is shaping us somehow in a wrong way. If, from my own perspective, that could be what some people, So on one hand, we have the books that people may write, which should shape the minds of people if people would read. But on the other hand, we have this barrage of information coming from social media, coming from our music industry, and is emphasizing those wrong values that we talk about.
Thank you. The creative industry, let me say creative writing is an aspect of the creative industry.
Okay.
Now, creative writing is supposed to be the driver of the other aspect of the creative industry. For instance, you see people in advanced countries, they sing a song and reference lines of a book.
Yes.
Now, people do their works and leave the creative writing out of it. People write music and leave creative writing out of it. People do movies and just do screenplays.
That's in Nigeria.
In Nigeria. They do screenplays and forget to draw an essence from a book. For instance, the person who wrote, or the woman, the author who wrote Harry Potter didn't just come out of a screenplay. It came out of 7 series of a book. I heard the woman is about the 196th richest woman in the United Kingdom. So what I'm trying to say is that creative writing is supposed to be the driver of the creative industry. So that's why we have this barrage of, let me say, somebody just comes with a music and doesn't look at how will this thing shape society. How will this thing shape the mind of people? So when you go to the street, you see a whole kinds of misnomer. Hard drugs, you just sing a song on hard drugs.
Yes.
And you don't know how
see a lot of that these days.
thing affects the young, especially the young.
For example, I mean, unfortunately, you know, we have a certain Grammy winner in Nigeria. And the most famous song, which I hear, even a few of my white friends, I hear them singing it. And he's saying that he needs some drug and some drinks. And that's the most famous part of I can't sing it here.
Yes.
And I won't mention the guy's name. But that happens to be, and like I've just said, it's very easy for an impressionable mind to want to explore what the guy is saying.
Yes.
Hey, this is what I need. This is what takes me to the level. And that song, I don't know whether that was the song that actually got the Grammy, but the guy got a Grammy, and that's where we find ourselves, you know. But do you think people are still reading? Okay, are people still writing creative books?
Yes.
And are people reading them?
That's a perfect question. If you look at the way society is shaped in Nigeria, in contrast, I always like to call the contrast to other countries. Fela spoke about the 44 standing and 44 sitting and 99 standing on a bus.
Yes.
How can you read on that bus?
Okay.
You go to a park. A park normally is supposed to be a green garden.
Yeah.
Not a place where you take liquor.
Exactly.
Where you just have nature all around you and you take a book to read. Why do you think people subscribe more to the other sides of creative industry, such as music and other things? Because while you are in the bus, there's a tune on your ear, and you can listen to any music within 3 minutes. You can listen to a comedy within 5 minutes. But for a book, you need hours, and you need an environment. Where do you live? How is your city mapped out? So
the non-performance of the economy is an issue.
Yes.
That's one. Okay.
It negates. Point number two.
But are they writing them? You guys,
yes.
How many of this are you guys churning out, at least?
If we compare how in the days of Chinua Achebe, I think before he passed on to glory, I think he had written over 6 novels. Creative writers in our time cannot do that because we have work to do. We have to meet up. Yes.
So, okay, you know what? I'll pause you at that point. Let's go and pay a bill. I think we are hitting onto something here. Let's go and pay some bills, and then we'll be right back.
Now, as part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening...
Now, looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130...
Created a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the...
Already, if you look at English squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at...
Welcome back, viewers, and we've been discussing with Mr. Everlasting Hope on the impact of creative writing in shaping the philosophy of a country or a society. So you're welcome back.
Thank you very
And
much.
before we left, we were discussing about the feasibility of even writing creatively.
Yes.
Are you saying there's no money there?
There is. I just made mention about
Yes.
the...
What about in Nigeria? You
yes.
mentioned J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
I don't know if Chinua Achebe's estate is still getting his,
yes,
his
very well.
royalties and so on. But let me also say that why I'm a bit worried is that I'm a bit involved in that industry in some ways.
Okay.
And what I know as an author myself is it's always exciting when you want to write a book and when you finally write the book and you publish it, you give it a cover, you know, you are the type, you set it and all of that, it's looking good.
Yeah.
So many authors are very happy, you know, pushing out the book.
Yeah.
But that is where the problem starts.
Yes.
A lot of authors right, with a view to be able to make a living from all of that effort, which oftentimes, as far as I'm concerned, in Nigeria, you had better have a second address as an author. Maybe very few authors, if they would call you to programs to come and speak here and there, or if you're lucky to have a big publisher, usually from abroad, people like Chimamanda Adichie, who gets published abroad and all, you know, and maybe sometimes from here as well, but she gets a lot of space to come and speak to people. I'm sure they pay her. She probably can survive on those. But I think that too many authors in Nigeria, they are frustrated because money doesn't come. Even when you carry your books to bookshops, right? You take your books to bookshop. Often, many of the bookshops they may sell, you will get your money. Or it may just be that your book is not noticeable among the thousands, hundreds of thousands of books in each bookshop. You know, maybe you have to have had fame in another place. For example, maybe you are a newspaper editor or columnist, you've been around forever, everybody knows you, you've been in politics. If you've been in politics, minister of this and that, you now leave politics and write a book. People are curious to know what you've written, you know. But for those who are really writers, who want to make their mark, is there money there? How are they surviving in Nigeria? What's the issue?
When we talk about Nigeria, sometimes we draw our references from abroad. Even the J.K. Rowling you mentioned in one of our commentaries, she said she lived in poverty while writing the book. But the good thing about Europe was that they have a fund. She was able to access a fund. That's among the things we don't have here. We don't have philanthropists who are doling out money for creative writing. That's number one. And number two, the government is not there. For instance, EU, I think in 2014, they doled out about 1.4 trillion euros to create a program for creatives. Yes, even UAE did an opera, and they created a building, an opera building, I think it's over $300 and something million, which has a publishing arm. So if you look at how the countries abroad run, and I was talking about US, I said they have 9,000 public libraries and have over 100 private libraries. And here, we hardly have private libraries. We don't have public libraries that are functioning.
If we have private libraries, people keep it private, you can't access them.
You can't access them.
Oh, but I must say, I've been to Obasanjo Library, which is quite a remarkable place, even though it's more of a museum than a library. It's not like a place where you go and there's so many books. Yeah, there's books, but it's more of a museum of his trajectory. But it's a very remarkable project, which he has in Abeokuta. So it must be said, and that's the first president that had the
ventured
mindset to have a public library of that sort, you know. But I think you have to pay a certain token in order to get in. So
not to even cut you short. If in the US, each library is likely to buy your books, probably 10 of it, and you have 100 libraries, you can imagine that you are already having an income. But here we don't have such. Number two, our curriculum do not promote readers of literature, and hence do not promote writers of literature. So now you wrote a book, Nigerians don't want to read it. Chimamanda, you said, for instance, only a few backlog of Nigerians read a book, except probably a school, you are schooling, probably secondary school, asks you to buy it because of the curriculum, not because you want to read it. Those are part of the effect. The curriculum do not allow us to love reading. The environment we live is too hostile to allow us to read. The town planning do not allow us to read. From the bus stop to where you are going to is a bike that will take you. You see somebody raising his hand, cursing somebody on the road. There's no road safety officers to manage the people. The people are angry. There's hunger. So how can philosophy thrive?
Is one place where we don't have, at least very remarkable. There are no speed limits in this country, and nobody enforces it. the white man does. You know, like the other day I was driving towards Karu, and it's quite hilly.
Yes.
And the government is they're patching the road, making it better. So I said to myself, what they're telling us is, speed all you want. If you like, crash your car. You know, we'll come and clear up the mess, and so on. In that kind of place abroad, they will put a speed limit there that would ensure that by the time you're going to that slope, you're slowing down, because they don't want you to create a mess for them to come and... so I just thought that, but I think it's also an opportunity for governments that will come, that if we had a more organized society, in fact, in order to organize society, you need people. That means you are creating jobs for them, people who will monitor all of those things. That is what it is. You are raising revenue, because if people violate, you should be ready to collect your fine from them. That is how countries raise revenue. And you are having a more ambient society, which even foreigners would like to come. That is tourism. Dollars coming. So a lot can happen if we just begin to organize society, including people having more inspiration to write. So you don't only have to write about the chaos. For example, I remember, you know, works like Jaguar Nana, works like No Longer at Ease, that talked about the Lagos of those days, the Lagos of the 50s, you know, Obalende, here and there, you know, they painted a certain picture. But as society is evolving, what you have taught me today is that creative writing is also what mirrors that society. There's a lot to write about our current circumstance, even on a fictional angle, creating characters, inserting them into that society, and, you know, and somehow ministering to the minds of people.
You've said it, and when you say when Chuna Achebe wrote There Was a Country, the mixed feelings it came with showed that Nigerians didn't understand that it was the figment of his own imagination, and he wanted us to see it from his own perspective. And to also see the folklore, the truth behind the scene, the truth also, the realism. He wanted us to see all those things and paint a picture in our mind. I remember that I think in the 1700s, a man called Edmund Lord, he wrote a book. I'm not talking about the implications of us not writing. He wrote a book and said that the African race is debased. So because they are debased and they may likely not ever grow up in evolution, let's make them the slaves. And for 100 years, the black race lived in slavery because somebody wrote. I have a friend in the US who said, we don't read any books about you people. So what we do is we write what we think mirrors you people. So and when we write it, and you know, there were two authors who wrote a book in Europe and said Europeans were more greater than everybody, and it stood the test of time. You know, generations came and went, and they felt in their mind that they were great. So you can imagine when we don't write, we now live the philosophy of others. We just live the national ideologies of a people probably in China, of a people probably in the US. That's why sometimes you see a mother said, I don't know you for this. Where did you import this idea from? It's because our own books, what we do, we only celebrate a few writers. Few celebrated writers, especially those who came like footballers from abroad. Meanwhile, we have our own indigenous writers who saw it from their own perspective, who lived their life, who suffered a particular dilemma and said, let me write it from this purview. If you even look at the SDG goals, it talks about a sane environment for writers. Overseas, you see people write and they give you a break. They say, you are writing? Okay. We give you, just like pregnant women, we give you a leave, a study leave.
Yeah, that's one thing we see here, that many of our so-called big men, former government officials, president, governors, very few of them will say, listen, I'm done, maybe 8 years, or how many years, whatever you're serving. All I want to do, I was looking at one documentary today of a place in Nigeria called Gashaka. And we had one or two British explorers who came there recently. That place is beautiful. I think it's somewhere in Taraba or something. and you just want to be there or go to Obudu, just stay and write.
Right.
In an atmosphere of quiet.
Yes.
I look at many of the mansions in Abuja. People like all these big mansions.
Yes.
Many times they are in very secluded, they are in very quiet places because the big men are living there. But nobody is writing. I'm thinking this is waste of resources. You are wasting the silence. Yes. You are wasting the quiet.
Yes.
You know, you're not pouring out your mind. You're not pouring out your imagination. When I started writing, I was inspired by something I read somewhere. It said everybody has at least one book in their head.
Yes.
It could just be the book of your life, your autobiography.
Yes.
Don't die until you write it. So as we are closing this today, so you, from your perspective as a creative writer, if this program is going to be able to help you to put a message across that will make your life easier, you know, in Nigeria, as a creative writer, what would you want to say? Like a message, you know, something. I want you to think hard about it, and you know, maybe in 1 or 2 minutes.
I think the only thing I would want to say is that we need a government.
But mind you, I don't want it to also be only government.
Yes,
we know. Yeah,
yes. First of all, we need a government that will create a hub, a city, like I say in the US, where a whole city has been marked for creative writers. Creative writers rule the world. They churn out new innovations. The train and the planes we see, someone wrote them down. There's a philosophy that says an idea is 1,000 years behind an invention. Most of the inventions we see today had already been pictured by philosophers, have been pictured by creative writers. They put it down and they said, I'm foreseeing a future. And scientists come and said, let's check the book of social scientists. Let's check the book of social writer. Let's check the book of social philosopher. Probably there was a sense in what he said. He created a city. So we need a city that is being built. And I want to encourage young people. I want to encourage upcoming Nigeria. I want to encourage the youth. Think beyond the challenges your environment is bringing out and begin to put pen to paper. You were created for creativeness, and you were created to write. You were created to create a record. You were created to bring out history so that the world behind you, the children behind you, we have something to say, where do we go from here? As we did with Chinua Achebe's book, as we did with Wole Soyinka's book. So we must leave a legacy behind.
Fantastic.
So that we can move to the next level. Let's
leave it here. Probably would invite you another time as well. There's one saying that I like to repeat often. It says that people have to study history to understand where they are coming from, why they are where they are today, and where they need to go. It's a compass. And I also say, if we don't start writing everything down, God forbid, in 100 or 200 years' time, our children in school will still be reading about Jane Austen, Emil Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and all the British books and books from everywhere, but our own. So it's time, like you said, for us to exert ourselves and stamp our feet on the sands of time. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, viewers, for sticking with us today. It's been great, putting out this show today. See you next week.